right, welcome everyone to our Q&A with Qlik webinar series. We are so excited to have all of you with us today for our February session, and that is Boosting Qlik Sense Performance. Happy belated Valentine's Day to all of you. We love all of our Qlik users, and we love the opportunity to bring everyone together, especially when it involves learning from our Qlik Techsperts. This series is a live question and answer session, or you may have seen us refer to it as our live office hours with our expert panelists. You can use this time to ask a question on today's topic and hopefully get to know some of us here at Qlik a little bit better. On that note, I am Katie Davis. I will be your moderator for this session. I'm a senior community program manager on our customer success experience programs team. So basically, my team is here to make sure Qlik users have the best possible digital experience and resources to be successful with our tools. I'm located outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's the northeast of the United States coast. And I'm joined by Jamie Gregory, who will be the lady behind the curtain today. She will help field your questions in the Q&A and of course, jump in to remind me of anything I forget to say. It does happen more often than I'd like. She has always been my go-to expert here at Qlik, and she certainly knows all the best resources. Jamie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Katie. Welcome, everyone. We're very excited to be here today to talk about some performance things that are going on with Qlik Sense. Again, my name is Jamie Gregory. I'm the Community Operations Manager here at Qlik. So I am the one out behind the scenes also in the community, making sure that it is up and running, getting you new features, and just hopefully providing a great experience. So again, welcome, and I'm excited for today.
Thank you. Now, before I introduce the rest of our panelists, I'll go over some session parameters, some housekeeping items. Everyone is currently on mute, and we ask that you type your questions in the Q&A panel below. We'll not necessarily be using the panel to type out the answers because we want to get to them all live today. Our survey link will pop up after the session is ended. It's also linked at the end of this presentation, so be sure to complete it. It takes 15 seconds. We've made it shorter and sweeter this year. And we also plan to email this recording a week from today, and in that email will be the link to the survey again. It helps us continuously improve the session, and we want to make this experience as good for you as it is for us. We may have some new participants in today's session. And one thing we love is when participants share future topics. So these can range from anything from product specific or functionality focused. Go ahead and email us your ideas at digital@qlik.com. You can also give us topic suggestions when you register for each of these sessions. And speaking of registrations, when you sign up for the next session, there's an option at the very bottom of the page that you can check to receive monthly email invites for our sessions, so you will not miss a beat. Keep in mind that even though we have Qlik Techsperts on the line, we will not be able to answer case-specific questions. And we ask that you keep the questions relevant to today's topic, which of course will be boosting Qlik Sense Performance. So without further ado, today joining us, we have Mario Pitre, a Principal Technical Support Engineer, Per Isfalt, an R&D Associate VP, and Oystein Kolsrud, which we have as our software architect showing up on the screen here. So well, let's start with Mario. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for everyone that's joined so far. I'm a principal technical engineer in the signature support team, working out of Lund, Sweden. Have been working at Qlik for going on 7 years now, ever since the Qlik Sense 1.0 days, and have my fingers in all sorts of things that have to do with performance, backend, communication, services, and scalability, pretty much from day one. So happy to see your questions on the topic. And I've worked very closely with our panelists here over the past few years on related topics. So I hope we can answer your questions as best we can today.
And I'll add that Mario recently did a Techspert talk, which is one of our other support webinars. So I highly recommend you all check out that recording as well. There's some great information in there. All right, Boosting, you are up.
Okay, so I'm putting myself to architect in what is known as the customer first team here at Qlik. And our role is to serve sort of as a bridge between support and R&D. And we primarily get engaged in escalated customer cases. These are cases that for some reason are at such a state that it's difficult for support to deal with them, but also difficult for R&D to deal with them directly, because typically the issues are vague or uncertain where they're coming from. And a lot of those issues are related to performance, which is one of the reasons why I'm part of this panel here today. And I've been involved in a number of cases where performance and especially scalability and large system deployments have been an issue, and helped work those out and help the customer get going on that. So that's my role here. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Per, do you want to close out the introductions?
My name is Per Osfeldt. I'm managing the engine teams at Qlik. I've been here for a while, and I've also been involved in a couple of situations where we have had challenges with performance, and I'm probably not able to answer as technical as Øystein and Mario here, but I'll do my best to support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll remind everyone, go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A panel below. We have some unanswered ones that we scoured community for that we'll start with and get those out. And I think a good way to start this session is with our first question, which everyone feel free to jump in and share your opinion on. But the question is, can you share your go-to tip for optimizing apps? Who wants to tackle that one first?
Run the app metadata analyzer on that particular app or all apps and start there. Understanding sizes of tables, understanding how that application behaves in memory is a first step towards optimization. Even without understanding much of the data model, just from a platform admin standpoint, it's a good place to start.
I would also like to add that a very important part there is that what you mean by app optimization might differ quite a lot from customer to customer. And especially Indeed. It's important to start to look at, is it the opening of the app that is slow, or is it the traversing through different sheets that is slow that you want to optimize? Because the resolution of those two will have very different, require very different approaches. So that's the first thing. Is it slow to open, or is it slow to navigate?
Got it. Got it. All right, then we'll jump into our next one. How do extensions affect performance?
I can start answering that. Mario might add on it.
Sure.
So extensions are not that different from the native visualizations, I would say. So there's no real sort of fundamental difference in performance between them. Of course, again, you need to look a little about what kind of forms you're looking at, because the client will have some performance issues sometimes, but that is quite rare. Typically, where we see things going slow is in the interaction with the engine, because that is where the heavy evaluations are being performed. And extensions will require access to the engine, so that will be performed in the visualizations through the APIs. So it's very hard to say that extensions are in general slower than native visualizations, but we from Qlik, of course, spend quite a lot of time doing quality assurance on the visualizations we have. So the likelihood of our native visualizations are the ones we guarantee performance and behavior on and provide support on. So that might be an issue with the extensions. Do you want to add something, Mario?
Yeah, one particular aspect of extensions in general, I think, is more narrow focused on mashups, and the way that these integrate with the core Qlik Sense functionality. A mashup is an extension can be a mashup. This is essentially web content that you're serving in a different way than through the native client, and you also always have to be careful in the way that you actually integrate this code within your web application, and how you call to the Qlik specific functionality from that web application. You can have performance issues if requests are burst in an uncontrolled way. You can have performance issues if, let's say, session handling is not done correctly at the mashup level. And this is not something that will be immediately noticeable just by the fact that you're using it as an extension versus native content. But going back to the first question as well, it's very important to qualify that question when we ask about performance. What is actually slow? Is it the client-side behavior? Is it the loading of the content on screen first? And depending on what the answer is, we can narrow down and try to dig deeper there. But absolutely no immediate concern.
Right. Now, there was a question in our Q&A that Dave asked. It says, is that a way to optimize the transfer the JS files, which is minimize blocking / waiting, such as HTTP2?
Right. So actually, this question comes with perfect timing. We've just released the February 2022 version of Qlik Sense Enterprise on Windows, and this comes with the added capability of customizing cache control headers for content that comes under the extensions endpoint, as well as content libraries. And with this, you can optimize how static files that form a particular extension object, such as JavaScript instructions or style sheets, are served first and foremost to the client, and then what is the client allowed to do with that information? Up until now, we would invalidate most of this local cache after about an hour, so there would be quite a bit of repeat operations in reserving that content from the server. Now, with this added capability, you can slightly tweak those cache control headers depending on what content you want to serve, and decide how you want that to be kept by the browser and how often you want it invalidated.
That's great. Thanks. We have a question. It says, do you think section access slows the data load time? If yes, how can we optimize this? Thoughts on that?
I would like to say it certainly can. And the complexity of the section access table modeling comes very much at play. Per? Any insights here from the engine side?
I don't have any general advice, but we sometimes see data models becoming much more complex as a result of section access. But I don't have any advice of how to do it better, unfortunately.
So one thing that you need to be aware of when using section access is that if you don't use section access, then whenever a user opens an app on the server, then that app will be in memory, and all the other users connecting to that app will benefit from that because it doesn't need to be loaded again. But if you use section access, it's likely, depending on how this section access is and the user privilege and all that many users will take that hit because it will need to be processed. Data loaded will need to be processed based on the user's privileges. So that could be visible in the app open times.
Okay, thank you. And we have a follow-up question.
Answering that follow-up direct in the chat. Unfortunately, This is so fresh out of the oven that we haven't really, at least I haven't had the chance to get my hands on it and play around. So I'm not sure to what extent it will help with request multiplexing, but it's something that we can definitely take a look in and bolster our documentation on the topic. If you have a specific concern, you're always welcome to put that in our community, and we'll get to helping you more on that specific question.
Great. All right, so there's a bit of a long one here. I hope it gives enough background to answer. It says, we recently migrated from the enterprise version to the SaaS version of Qlik Sense. We didn't have any difficulties, except some users complained about the low performance of cloud applications when compared to the on-premise version. Can you help us solve this problem? Any reason for a slowdown?
It's
Question?
again, it's a very big
I
question.
think we were
of course,
about to say the same thing.
Yeah, we need to know what kind of performance issue it is. Where is the performance hit? What is the actual user experience?
So the first big difference here, I would say the first big difference here is that that content is no longer within your network, within your company's network. You are getting it from the internet. So that would be the first thing to check on my side.
Okay.
Another relevant thing is to look at the size of this app, and depending on how you use cloud or cloud services, the memory profile might be different, because if you have a big machine that you use to run it on-prem, then you would have that memory available for your app. But in cloud, it could be different. And others, I'm sure Per can talk more about how we can deal with memory in cloud and have custom nodes for customers, for instance. But that could be something that could come into play. And if you have a big app that has been moved to cloud, then you might not benefit as much from caching of evaluations, for instance, because the memory on the machine might be smaller. You could have that type of performance issues there.
And if there's a way they can get kind of more of a personalized review and share their more details, would you recommend that they open a case for this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think we need to take it on a case-by-case basis. It very much depends, and also we need to speak to this customer and understand what their journey up to this point with the transition has been, to see what kind of actions were performed on those applications, what kind of readiness checks, and did those pass. And another thing is, platforms or projects can become instantly hyper successful because of the SaaS capabilities that our platform offers. So user counts and data volumes can start ballooning very, very quickly as soon as that project is released out into the world with a particular customer. So all things being equal, that question is not super easy to answer. So we would have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And as always, ask the basic questions. Is it the same bad experience for everybody? And is it with any specific objects or any specific sheets? Or is it just a generalized experience?
Then that can really,
because it could just be a
down.
factor of them having to connect to the internet to get that content instead of their local company network.
Yeah,
if they had
especially
it
when
on-premise
people
before.
are working from home, I'm sure the environment differs greatly from user to user. Yeah. Okay, we have a question from John in our Q&A. It says, is there any way to prevent sessions from overusing resources and affecting other sessions? For example, if a large table with a lot of complex calculated fields is being opened and causing slowness in the environment. It's a good question, John.
I have kind of a basic take here, and this is coming from a sysadmin, not a data engineer. Anything that you can do to pre-calculate that at script level or during your ETL phase will benefit loading on the UI side. Sometimes the requirements will prevent that from being possible. The second option is to pre-warm that application to avoid, let's say, hitting a particular end user with the cost of opening that application for the first time in the morning. However, if you then add complexity of data slices or section access on top of that, you need to make sure that you load this particular user's data slice in order for that user to benefit. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that the right kind of information would already be sitting in memory. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts.
Yeah, we do also have limits that you can set, both in size, how much memory a certain calculation can use, and you can set the timeout of how long something is allowed to run. And that can be used in a way to limit excessive usage from certain users.
And that would be, just for clarity, that would be the object calculation related settings in your QMC on the engine nodes.
All right. Hope that answers your question, John. I will remind everyone to keep asking your questions in the Q&A so we can get to them today. We have a question here. It says, may I know the process of Qlik Sense cache warning and how does it affect the performance of the applications? Are there any steps to follow?
Right. So one of the simplest ways to pre-warm an app is to simply shoot an open app request via our APIs. The other simpler way is to set up a very, very basic test scenario with Qlik Sense Enterprise scalability tools and kind of simulate basic navigation or just a quick app open that will then preload that application in memory. But it also will, the benefit of this action will depend on data slicing, essentially, and whether there is a complex section access built on top of it. If that is the case, you would, in order to benefit these users, you would have to simulate the access with those specific users' IDs or representative IDs in the section access model in order for those slices to be loaded up. And I can see Jamie posted something here that goes to the SDK. I think there should be an easier to follow article on Community on how to do cache warming.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
I'm trying to find that.
Yeah,
I told you guys she's the best with resources.
Yeah, that's a very basic one. I know there are other tools like this available in the community that does a more thorough job on cache warming, and that I know that a number of customers are using. So it could be worthwhile to look around a little. I'll see if I can find the one that I've seen most commonly used.
All right. Well, Oystein looks for that. We have a question from Louis. We have 12 nodes configured in our environment. Can you recommend some best practices outside of the admin playbook?
Well, it is an excellent place to start. But if you haven't looked into it already, with this size of an environment, I would say pay attention to the repository service listeners and the amount of connections in the connection pool configured in the whole environment. So between all of the services and then from these machines to the Qlik Sense repository database. I'm going to see if I can find a more targeted link from my past webinar on the topic. This can dramatically affect performance in an environment. And essentially, to keep it simple, what you want to ensure is that, first of all, your database is configured in such a way that can listen to connections incoming from all of your environment at once. And then also, you need to allow every single node to create enough connections to serve the requests that are coming in via that particular node. If all of that lines up, you should be already in a pretty good space.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share Community. This is what we were talking about the previous webinar. If you go out to support programs, Techspert talks, right now we're at the Q&A with Qlik, we will see this optimizing performance for Qlik Sense Enterprise. And I think the first section is where you talk about the multi-node, right? So you don't have to listen far to get your answer.
That's one of them. And then further down the line, I think I talk about optimizing Postgres and the optimizing the repository service.
Okay, so a great resource to check out. Let me paste this in for everyone. Let's see, to everyone. Here you guys go. All right. We're getting more and more questions in. This is what I love to see. Okay, does calculated dimensions impact the performance of Qlik Sense app? Is it always necessary to create a back-end field instead of calculated dimension?
I think the the answer to that is probably no. Obviously, we have the feature there for a reason, there are calculated dimension that is very hard to do in the backend because they are based on other dynamic stuff in your app. But performance-wise, if you can choose between having them as calculated dimensions or in the script, then having them in the script is always better. But that's not always an option.
Okay, thanks. All right, and then Marco asks, is it relevant to enable the clear cache to optimize Qlik Sense Client Manager?
I'm guessing this is the clear cache times per day setting that we have in the community. I would like to caution customers from going all out on using this particular setting. We have some data on hand that kind of tells us when it's most effective. And from my experience, it is on scheduler nodes because user bytes are added constantly, whether there is or there isn't any user traffic. And this can allow maybe to squeeze in one extra reload or give it just a little bit of extra headroom. But on consumer nodes, the only situation that I can think of where you would benefit from zapping the cache constantly is if you have a set number of applications that are used pretty much once a day by a large number of unique users, right? Because this would essentially throw out on a timed basis all of the older cache while preserving the newer one and still be able to serve those most recent users. But when it comes to zapping the cache or clearing the cache, essentially, our speed comes in great part from having all of this stuff in memory and at the ready. So there can be a diminished return kind of point that you can reach with a setting and actually get rid of cache that you would otherwise have benefited from.
Very helpful, thank you.
Also, to keep in mind with the setting is that it is a timer-based setting from the moment you start the service and not a given schedule per day. So you're going to have to figure out how that would fit within your reload schedule, for example, if you want to apply it on scheduler nodes. But the savings on large machines are minimal. The impact as well, there is no cost that I could see even running it 50 times per day when it comes to doing the work. Whether that then makes for a better experience for your users totally depends on the usage patterns. And I think you have to start understanding that, how your users use your apps and kind of where the slowness is coming from, or what part of that usage or user pattern you are trying to optimize.
Some great insider insight on all of these resources out there. All right, keep the questions coming. We're about halfway through. We want to make sure that if you have a question that we're here to answer it. My next question is a bit of a multi-part question. So let's see if we can get through this together. Currently, our app contains data at least granular level, so daily, and contains a large number of rows, which is causing high load times. In order to improve performance, we have decided to load data in an aggregated form, say monthly, or on a company level. Before converting to this aggregated form, what should be checked for feasibility in the current data model? Whew, I got through it with a few bumps, but I got through it. So they're asking, should the data be aggregated in Extractor itself or the final report app? How to best aggregate dimension tables, any other thing that should be done before the aggregating? Any thoughts on that one?
Wish I was a better dev to be able to answer those.
Yeah, I would probably need to have a follow-up question on what the end user wants to use this data for. Because it's hard to say what the effect would be on the end user experience without understanding what they are looking for. But I mean, we have other ways of dealing with aggregated data, such as on-the-fly app generation. So there might be other routes to look at as well before choosing to just limit yourself to the aggregated data.
All right.
But I think that's something we see quite often, that people have aggregated data or old data that are using as aggregated as a way to reduce the data size. And I think making sure that you can put this together, it's a question of how that data model looks, of course. And I think for some, if you have worked with where you have like a budget and actual data and trying to make sure that you can calculate over it, it's kind of a similar pattern where you need to think about how does this data look like and how do I want to represent it. And I think quite commonly people would store data like this in a QVD layer with aggregated data and then read that into the app. It's hard. It's probably hard to give a general advice on this, but I think this is something that has been quite commonly done over the years. And I think if somebody needs specific help with their application, the Qlik consultant team is probably a great place to get hands-on help if that's needed.
Great, thank you. All right. Which nodes, and we might have touched on this earlier as we were going through the nodes, which nodes consume the most resources?
Depends on what you have those nodes do. It really does depend. Gosh.
The place where most calculations are performed is depending on how much reloads and how many users you have would be either the reload or the consumer nodes. That's probably as far as we can
in
say.
General, anything that has an engine service on it.
Okay.
But yeah, it very much depends.
Sure,
it could be one app that gets reloaded once a night and then consumed by millions of users on a completely different node. In that case, that would be definitely the consumer node experiencing the most load.
All right.
In some occasion, we will also see the central node taking load, but that is not typically from the engine. That is from other activity, in particular in the QMC. But that's also a very different sort of performance that you can run into in large deployments.
All right, before I ask our last question from community, and then unless you guys have more questions, we'll end it after that, but be sure to get them in now so we can answer them. I know, Mario, you mentioned you wish you were a better dev, so I'm going to use that time to do my plugin. Next week, we're piloting our first Q&A with Qlik developer series, where we're talking about embedded analytics, our API integration. So that's this time again next week. Feel free to sign up for that if you guys want to see the developer side of things. And hopefully, if you like it, we'll make it a regular monthly thing. So that's just another side of this Qlik wheel that we have. All right, let me see if I see people are posting articles that are great in our chat. And we have a few more questions. So the final call worked. We're getting these questions in. When using AWS, what's the best instance type for the different types of nodes? Engine node, schedule node, etc. C class, M class.
Right. So these stand for compute optimized, memory optimized, and such. I really don't remember off the top of my head what the recommendations are, but essentially, I would look at what is your highest consumed resource and optimized for that on the particular node. right? So if a scheduler node is working with few but large apps that do expand quite a bit of memory, I would make that memory optimized, that particular instance. However, if you're working with multiple parallel reloads that execute rather quickly, you want to optimize for compute there. So it very much depends on the kind of workload that is expected from that server. Testing is very much a thing in this world, and AWS, all the big providers will be changing hardware platforms on these machines. They will release new optimizations, new backend changes that can affect how our applications or anybody's applications may perform in these virtual instances. So before deploying a large scale project, I would always encourage running a set of scalability tools, exercises against that platform, and see if there are any bottlenecks. The other area that is seldom looked at with enough attention when it comes to scaling an environment in these virtual private cloud providers is the storage layer. It is a very different proposition to have an R4 server with file services installed where all of your machines will be attacking versus having an elastic block storage set up that will be able to scale much better in certain circumstances.
And that feeds kind of right into my next question, which is, can you share how to use the Qlik scalability tools? I don't know if it would be helpful if you could share your screen and show a little bit about the scalability tools.
That's a big topic. That's a big topic. But I did a very quick intro during my webinar. There was a timestamp there for that, and I can leave you with a link to the main article where the tools are collected. There is also a video on it, I believe.
All right. And then as you're looking for that, I'll call out some other ones. Someone's asking, what are the common configuration mistakes you encounter that cause performance issues with Qlik Sense?
Well, from my part, from support, I can say one of the main ones is a misconfigured repository connection pool. As a platform grows over time, if the system admin never went back and checked on those settings, you can end up in a situation where, because of the number of nodes, you are generating more traffic against the database than the database is configured to accept. So you always have to make sure that when scaling, you configure all of your communication channels to accept that new workload.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, another thing that I think appears from time to time is also how the load balancing rules for apps are used in the system. If you have some big apps, then you want to make sure that those are being opened and used on the big nodes as well. So sometimes you might have dedicated nodes for taking the large apps and let all the other apps go to some other node, because they will have a very different requirements in terms of memory, primarily.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have one last in the chat. I'm going to call it the last question, unless there's any more that come in.
There is one that was sent to us by Telmo that I would like to address, because it's on the topic of setting up cache control with this new feature from Feb 2022. So he's referring to one of our luminaries having written about this topic back in the day. I want to say, Telmo, much has changed here in the product. And in fact, with the luminaries instructions, there is only so much you can do already, and it requires you messing around with the database. The way that it's implemented today, you get to write your content policy rules in the QMC. So much safer, much broader scope, but it'll require some testing.
Yeah. Thank you for pulling that one through. All right.
And of course, just super big caution, don't try to target any dynamic endpoints. I don't think this is even possible at the product level. But of course, anything that requires a query to our backend before you get a response cannot be cached, because the response will be different every time, or can be different every time.
Great, good point. All right. Dave asks, AWS seems to indicate you can use a load balancer in front of Qlik Sense. In your experience, is that a good idea?
Absolutely. Qlik Community, there are different ways to implement load balancers in front of an AWS setup. Some work better than others. I believe Elastic load balancing is the go-to solution these days. But it very much depends on what exactly you are trying to load balance and how. Are you going for super high availability? Are you going for pure load balancing? You want to make sure that every request gets sent to a different node. Those things can be configured at the Elastic load balancer level. You have to keep in mind though, Qlik Sense has its own load balancer at the proxy level that then will kind of load balance your requests between all of the engine nodes that are associated with that particular virtual proxy. So there are multiple tiers there.
Okay. All right. And John is asking, when trying to identify high CPU usage apps objects in a large environment, are there any recommended metrics or techniques that can be used to find these?
I can say a good starting point is always running the telemetry dashboard and collecting that data at the engine level.
Okay.
Yes, so there's some performance logs that can be activated, the Qlik Performance. And when you have those available, you can see, you get timing and memory profiles for all the calculations. They produce quite a lot of logs, but they can be very useful for identifying particular objects or operations that are very time or memory expensive.
So that's for front end. For the back end, I would say the other half of the equation in this particular question is the repository performance itself. It could come into play. It could be that resolving the results for the security rule evaluation for a set of users or a set of resources can be very complex and very costly, and that would also affect performance in a different way, perhaps not in a way that you can immediately notice by investigating it from the end user perspective purely. But more logging is available there as well. In order to produce those logs, you have to bump the repository performance logs under the trace section in your QMC to debug and collect for a couple of business days, and then approach support for help on analysis or even on community.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone. That seems to be the bulk of the questions that we got today. We really appreciate everyone who participated and asked your questions. I'm going to go through some quick resources. This out here is Qlik Community. Make sure you sign in with your Qlik ID, and you'll have access to all of these forums. Qlik Sense has a bunch. You can go in if you have questions on performance or anything specific as well. You can also chat with us. So under support, every page has our little chat bot available. So feel free to contact and talk with us. I know something we typically highlight is if there's something you want our products to do and you can't seem to find or see the way that it does it, we have this little ideation tab here where you can suggest an idea, and anything that has the most upvotes gets looked at closely by our R&D team, and we always investigate and try to continuously make everything better and better. A little plug for my side of things, our support updates blog is where you'll find everything you need to know on the support front, and then just keep going under these programs and finding the next Q&As that interest you, the next Techspert talks that interest you. If you want short little quick videos on how to do things, that's where you're going to look for Qlik Fix. I want to thank everyone that's here today. Jamie, do you have any parting words?
Yeah, just really quick, tomorrow we'll probably have a blog going out in the community news. We did have a release just yesterday for the Qlik community, and one of the major things is the downloads page. Katie, you're not logged in right now, but if you are logged in and you are a customer, partner, or employee, you'll be able to see the new community downloads page out on the Qlik Community. And so that's under support product news downloads. So something
That
very
looks
exciting.
great.
Great, thank you. And there a lot more went out yesterday, so we'll get that in the blog to share with all of you.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for participating. Oystein, Per, Mario, we really appreciate it. We hope you guys come back soon. It's been a fun time. I know this is a hot topic, so I'm sure we'll do this again. Again, next week is our first developer session, and then following that, we have our Qlik reporting service out in March. So sign up, register, subscribe, and then go ahead and fill out our survey. I'll make this the last slide that you see, if it'll let me click. There we go. Go ahead, give us your feedback. We hope to see you all next time. Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you all.
great day.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.